Hello and welcome to my show, The Awakening, here on WGSN-DB, the Going Bold and Going Solo Network. The information and opinions expressed on this show are just that. They are the opinions of the individual speaking based on their individual personal experiences. They are not intended to diagnose and do not constitute professional advice or recommendations. So my name's Tina Huggins. I'm your divorce coach specialist. I'm a divorce consultant, restorative family mediator, and conflictual co-parenting coach. That is actually a new certification for me. And today we're going to be joined by Matthew Hoffman. And our show is called, I just love the name of the show, it's called The Kickass Husband. So I got a little bit to talk about Matthew. Matthew is a relationship coach, author, podcast host, and national speaker who empowers men and women to become powerful and effective partners through his expert guidance and vast resources of Kickass Couples Nation. Kickass, the Kickass Husband, is helping you win at life, marriage, and sex. Ooh, great topic. As a fulfilled and successful husband, Matthew empowers men and women to overcome selfishness and unfulfillment, guiding them towards satisfaction and overwhelming love in their personal relationships. In addition, becoming the founder of the Kickass Assessment, co-host of Kickass Couples podcast, chief inspiration officer of Kickass Couples Nation, where he and his team teach teach imperfect couples how to deepen and strengthen their relationships. Matthew is also a regular expert contributor on relationships for NBC's Bloom, a syndicated health and wellness show. Wow, Matthew, going through this and getting ready for the show today, I was like just kind of blown away about some of the stuff that you're doing with the Kickass Nation. And so I would love to have you talk.
Sure. Well, I'm excited to be here, Tina. Thanks for having me on the show. It's definitely one of my favorite topics and where I really spend most of my time and career as I work with men and women and couples to try to take their relationships to where they've always dreamed they could be.
Well, awesome. So since you started off there, let's just stay there. Tell me how you got involved in all of this.
Well, it all started with my book that you mentioned, Kick-Ass Husband, Winning at Life, Marriage, and Sex. That came out about 4 years ago, and it took me a couple years to write. I was encouraged by my accountability group, which is a group of men that we meet half a day, once a month. And they kept saying, you ought to write a book. And anytime somebody tells you you ought to write a book, you usually say, well, that's your dream and not mine. I'd never really thought about it. But they said, hey, you do and know things that most men, that none of us know. You're constantly helping us, guiding us, and giving us things that we can do to strengthen our relationships. It would sure be nice if you took some time and put it into a book so that everybody would have the opportunity to learn what they can do to level up in their number one human relationship. So that's what I did. And with the outpouring of the book, it really got me into coaching and took me to how can I help people who want something in their relationship and don't have it, or are frustrated, or potentially dealing with divorce, or that may be on the table, and what can they do to bring it back into the relationship that they've always dreamed of.
Yeah. And so then where did the information that you put in the book come from? How did you learn that?
You know, it came from my own experience. I got to say that I have feet of clay. I make mistakes every day. I am not perfect, but the name of the book used to be something else. And my wife said, you know, I don't like that name. It doesn't really say what it is. You know, you don't want to be this. She goes, you want to be kick-ass. And I went, ooh. I go, well, am I a kick-ass husband? And she said, you are. So it's a title that I didn't make for myself, but one that I earned from my wife. So I would say that I've really worked hard. It started before we got married. I courted my wife, I wooed her, and I really did everything I could to demonstrate to her that she was my number one priority. in as far as a relationship. I'm a faith-filled guy, Tina. So I would say my wife knows that in the order of things that, I look up to to God as number one, and my wife is really the most important human relationship. There's no other relationship I have, not my family of origin, not my kids, that come before her, because I'm a firm believer that when our relationship is strong and firing on all the cylinders, we're going to then be able to show up not as one but as two united in everything else that we do.
And I love that. As you're talking, I'm going through memories of my late husbands and my relationship. And that's the way our life was. We for the last 4 years were joined at the hip. There was only about a couple of months, well, maybe 3 months altogether in the whole 4 years that we were apart. We lived in the same house, obviously. We worked in the same house because we were both working for my flooring store. And so those types of things were very important. Like, we had date night, no matter what, even though we lived together, saw each other 24/7, we had date night every Friday. We would get off of work, we would end our day early around 2 o'clock, and we would go out and we would socialize with ourselves. We had a special place or a couple of special places that we'd go, and we'd only talk with basically the bartenders or the waitresses that came over and knew us for coming in when we would go in. And so we would be there, out for maybe 3-4 hours with dinner, and then going and doing our little minor socializing. And then we'd go back home and we would share time together, snuggle on the couch and watch a movie together. And this was our Friday and sometimes our Saturdays every week.
That's incredible. It's so important, Tina. You hit the nail right on the head. Date nights are a great representation of time together. You can't build the relationship, increase the emotional sharing unless you're sharing time together. It might be over a dinner, like you said. It might be a concert. It might be a physical activity. It can take shape, and a date could be Chinese takeout on the ground in your living room on a blanket, right? And there's so many ways, and I talk about a lot of those things in my book, but you're never going to build connection or healthy attachment with your partner unless you have shared experiences. And dating and wooing and investing that time, prioritizing each other is a beautiful way to do that.
Well, very good. So in the book, obviously, it's big enough that it has lots of information in it. So what are some of the main things that you feel are most important in a relationship?
Well, I've got actually in my platform 14 pillars that I think are qualities that have to be present in every relationship. And the first three are kind of the most important, the three legs of the stool, I guess you could say. And we call them the 3 C's. And the first one is commitment. And that's really where I start. If I'm working with a couple and one is committed and the other one isn't, if I say, "Why are you here?" and the wife says, "Gosh, I need to rebuild connection. We're emotionally distant. We don't have this." And I say to the husband, "Why are you here?" And he goes, "Well, because she says I've got to be here." Well,
Mm.
so that's not commitment. So really we start with commitment. And if both members, both partners, both spouses are committed and willing to do what it takes, that leads us to communication, the second C. And communication is kind of the glue that really weaves through every quality in a relationship. And my superpower, people say, "Why are you a great coach? Why would I want to work with you?" And I say, well, my superpower is my ability to communicate well and teach you how to. So you can learn how to meet your partner's needs, not their wants necessarily, but their needs, and understand what you can do to support them in getting what's most important to them. And communication also leads to our third C, which is conflict resolution. Every relationship, Tina, healthy or unhealthy, has conflict. If you say there's no conflict in my relationship, I would wonder if you're telling me the truth or thinking, gosh, you're just a pushover and you're just letting your partner dictate everything that happens in the relationship, which is another sign of not being healthy either. So, commitment, communication, and conflict resolution is really where I start with every client, because that gives you a solid foundation. And if you have those things, it's really easy to work on trust, fun, laughter, intimacy, quality time, dealing with financial issues, and all the other faith and moral code, and all those other elements that kind of stack in and need to be in the relationship too.
Yeah, as you're talking, I go back through. So my husband and I were together for almost a full 7 years before he passed, and we had 3 fights. And when I say fights, they were escalated, and we had a handful of arguments. But because he had gone to enough therapy in his first marriage, he knew how to talk, so he was able to prevent arguments. But then if they started, because of my communication training, then I, of course, would have to leave the room. That's always been my thing. I would have to leave the room, get my composure, come back and own my side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would make sure that we would talk. We never went to bed, not one time, with anger in our heart. We would stay up and work that out. Generally, it only took us maybe an hour or 90 minutes to work out the situation and talk about what it was, sometimes not even that long. And then, of course, we ended with the I love yous and promising ourselves, not each other, but ourselves, that we would do better at trying to understand the situation if it arose next time.
That's beautiful. And you brought up something that's really important. In all relationships, Tina, there's always a pursuer and a distancer. I haven't worked with one couple where they each hold the same title. And when I say pursuer, it means, hey, let's talk about this now. I want to resolve this. Let's work through it. Let's address it. Let's deal with it. And then the distancer is the person who goes, whoa, 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 put the brakes on. I'm not ready to talk about this right now. I need some time. I want to process. Got to work through a few things. Doesn't mean they don't want to handle it. It just means I can't handle it right now. And so understanding that dynamic, no matter which one you are, most people are one or the other, you just got to know what your partner is too and what their needs are around resolving that conflict. Because if my partner, and I'm a pursuer, I want to get it done, let's go, let's work through it, and my wife is a distancer, give me time to think. I got to process. And she's not saying we won't talk about it, but she's saying let's revisit this another time. And so what I've learned to do is say, all right, when's a good time for us to get back together? When do you think you would be ready? And let's set a time. So I'm confident and feeling good that she's not stiff-arming me and saying, we're not talking about that. Unforbidden, can't go there. She's saying, I need time. So we figure out the time that works and we come back together when we're both in clear heads and calmer times. And there's a great acronym around that. I don't know if you've ever heard, it's called HALT, H-A-L-T. And if you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, if you're feeling any of those feelings, physiological needs, or emotions, it is really tough to show up and be present. So if you're hungry, you got to eat something. If you're angry, you got to take the time to diffuse so you're not leading with that anger. If you're lonely, meaning you're separated from your spouse, you got to have some time to connect and not to feel lonely. Or if you're tired, my wife in our early marriage used to want to talk about stuff of real importance at 10:30 at night. And I used to get up at 4:35 in the morning. And by 9:30, 10, man, I am on my way out, right? Ready to sleep. And we learned that that's not a great time to talk about heavy issues, that we've got to do it another time. Or I also learned, hey, if there's a need, I can't just say, sorry, you have an important need, I'm going to bed. I'd have to tough it out and wake up and get engaged. So we could address something that was serious if that's where it was.
Yeah, and as you're saying, you're talking about the pursuer and the distancer. I was the pursuer, but I knew my late husband was just amazing. He was kind and soft-spoken, and I am a 5th degree black belt, so I'm pretty intense. And so I know me, and I knew him, that getting into his face was a trigger for him because that's what his ex would do. So I would leave, which was my whole thing always. I needed to leave. I would usually leave and go drive from my first marriage. And that's how I needed to defrag my mind so that I could come back and handle the situation. But I was always the one in both relationships back to the table. I had to ask my late husband, I had to apologize for my end of it. I apologize or own what was mine. I didn't accept what was his. And then I would use, of course, as we teach our clients, the I statements. Never you did this, you did that. I felt when when that was said or whatever it looked like. And so it would possibly take him several hours to hear everything I said before he really came back to the table and
Sure.
owned his side of it.
Yeah. And, I think you talked about kind of danced around a little bit of key thing, Tina. It's, you got to learn how to apologize, right? There's a correct way. And you mentioned one of the most important things, which is, hey, I realize I have a role in this, right? I'm not free of any responsibility and I own my junk. I could have done a better job. I said I did this and I wasn't really living up to my best at that time. And then, saying, hey, can you forgive me for missing the mark, right? And then if sometimes it's a little thing and it's not, but sometimes, you maybe really hurt your partner or your spouse, then you got to say, what can I do to make amends? Like, how can I make this up to you? Because I don't want you to feel angry that I did something I shouldn't have done, and I'm committed enough to you and our relationship. What can I do to help make it right? And then commit to not doing it again so that we don't end up back in the same position. And that's huge. And so I really appreciate you touching on that.
Yeah. And what you just did there is something I think is important for couples as well, is that to recognize the good. It's so easy to see the bad, they hurt you, they angered you, whatever that might have been. It's so easy to see that, and definitely easy to elevate a voice and talk about it loudly.
Yeah,
And
you're
I
right.
think that we need to stop and we need to recognize the good in the fact that you just recognized something that I did.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's because there's always good in every situation. And there may be things that weren't handled right or things that could be done better. But, I think, that concept or that discipline of reflecting and, what are you grateful for? What's good? Maybe it's the behavior you don't like, but I guarantee you, it's kind of the 80-20 rule. If 80% of the time they're doing the right thing and loving you and giving you what you need, you can't throw that out the window just because there's a couple of things here and there that you're struggling with. And so I think that practice of gratitude is huge and goes a long way to preventing resentment and anger and frustration in the relationship.
Yeah. So the triggers, that was something that my late husband and I both came in from different types of abuse. Mine ended up to get physical. I ended up with broken hand and separated ribs and things like that. And he ended up with a scar on his back where she had bit him and drew blood, and then financial destruction and emotional, just horrible. And I think that emotional stuff and the financial side kind of come in on all of the ideal, but we came in with our own baggage. And so those triggers were there. There was things that he would say and or do that would trigger me. Not very often, but there was often things that I could say, mostly with the pitch of my voice, that would trigger him. And if that was happening, he would close down. And I knew there was no argument or anything, but I knew I needed to give him some space and then come back in and say, I'm sorry that what I elevated my voice or something to that effect. So what do you deal with triggers?
Yeah, triggers, we all have them. And I think it's kind of, you got to find understanding, right? So think about it this way. If you know you're going to walk into a minefield, and that's been flagged, right? Little flags show you where all the mines are. How stupid would it be to go jump on a flag? Because you know what's going to happen. It's no different in a couple in a relationship, right? When I know the things that push my spouse's buttons or the things that drive her crazy. Now, let me give you a prime example. My wife was married previously for a year and a half. No kids, didn't work out. High school romance, gone bad, basically. And, the guy was, just took a lot of advantage of her. And she finally got the guts up and said, no more. One of the things he would say to her is, yes, dear, in a very condescending way. And I had no idea of this story, right? But my wife was asking me to do something and I was smiling in a joking way. I said, yes, dear. And her countenance changed immediately. And she said, don't you ever say that to me again. And I said, why? What happened? She said, my ex-husband used to say that to me, right? And it brought it all back. It brought all that baggage forward. So I learned that and other things. And so I began to ask, I say, what are the things that get you angry? You know, like what are the things that are just non-starters for you? We began to have conversations about boundaries, and I learned what they are so I can avoid them. Because it's not kind and it's not loving to intentionally pull one of those triggers just because you're angry or you're upset. It's kind of, it's kind of like twisting the knife, right? When you know that they're sensitive to something, you do it anyway. So if you're not aware what your partner's triggers are, you got to ask and say, what just gets your goat and gets you going, right? Or what are the things that I do that drive you crazy? Right? I mean, if it's the way I breathe, obviously can't do anything about that, right? Or the sound of my voice. But, if she says, well, gosh, when you do this, it really frustrates me. So then I need to ask myself and say, do I have the power? And am I to change this? And, can I do this so it gives her what she's looking for? And if I can, with a little bit of effort and not changing my core value or crossing myself, why wouldn't I do it? So the converse to stepping on a trigger is saying, is there anything that I do that's triggering you so I can eliminate that in our relationship?
Yeah, I often tell people that if you really love your spouse, you don't intentionally pull that trigger. So if you wouldn't intentionally do it, why do you think they are intentionally doing it? And so then, because I have done restorative couple work with people, and when you ask that question, it's like dumbfounded. It's like they honestly never thought about the fact that maybe what the trigger was getting pulled, that they didn't intend to do that. They just thought that they were doing it on purpose to agitate them or make them mad. And if you really truly love somebody and you're working on your relationship, which we all should be all the time, then you wouldn't intentionally do that, like stepping on the landmine. But sometimes we do it. It's unintentional.
Right. It's not always, it's one thing if it's intentional, and if it's unintentional, then, you kind of want to learn where am I ignorant and what do I need to learn, right? Because we each do it. And that's where you come back to that 80-20 rule and you say, gosh, most of the time they're looking out for me, they're caring for me, they're responding to me. Then you say, hey, it's an issue, but let me communicate to you in a loving way the impact this has on me so and we can avoid this in the future because it's like, yeah, let's avoid the triggers and the landmines if we're able.
Mm-hmm. And I think that being able to know that they're there, knowing what they are. So yeah, you asked. So one of the things that I know triggers me is you can't grab me like my wrist. That is a big no-no. That'll instantly blow up like a volcano for me. That's what happened with my broken hand, is he grabbed me, and because I was a trained martial artist, I released and hit a door jamb and broke it. And then the fight was on. That was the beginning of the fight. I ended up through all of that one underneath a pickup truck. I crawled underneath that pickup truck to keep myself safe, to keep him away. I could kick him away, see his feet, and he couldn't see me.
Wow.
Bad deal.
That's a vivid example. Sure. Not a place you want to find yourself in, for sure.
Mm-mm, mm-mm. And I went several more years. I don't know, maybe 6 more years in that relationship before I left it. But that was a violent situation for me. And then 3 months before I left, it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, as he dislocated my knee by tossing me out of my van. And those are the flags. And I talk with people on a different level about the fact that I didn't know then what red flags were. I didn't even know that I was in an abusive relationship. The verbal stuff was stuff I didn't like. The physical stuff, it didn't bother me because I was trained, and that's what we did in class, is hit each other. So I didn't even recognize that as abuse, but the yelling and screaming I did. So when you talk about the triggers here, I don't know that I even know all my triggers.
Sure. And that's normal. Not everybody does, but some you're aware and you can communicate and share. It's kind of, there's a lot of conversations that couples really should have before they get married. And if they haven't, then once they are, when I talk to somebody and someone talks about, man, he's pulling my trigger, hitting the switch all the time. So then you back up and go, okay, well, have you had the conversation? Do you understand what they are, what they might be? That's a real important conversation to have if you haven't had it. And it's one that I encourage couples that are contemplating marriage or super serious, or if they're preparing for it, to have and understand that, because it's really a boundary, right? You're expressing, hey, here's what I'm comfortable with, and here's what I'm not comfortable with. One of the couples that we interviewed on the Kickass Couples podcast, young couple, 2 young kids, and one of the rules they've agreed on is that neither one of them is allowed to lay a hand on the other out of anger. Period. Non-starter, meaning you're not going to pull, hit, nudge, restrict. You're not going to do anything physically to me out of anger.
Right.
Period. And that's that's a rule, right? Do not pass go. That's a boundary. And they've never passed it, but they're each willing to die on the mountain, right? I always ask some of my clients, I go, are you willing to die on the mountain for this one? Meaning, is it so important to you that you'd rather freeze out on the mountain than give and have a different solution? And if you say, I'm willing to do that, then that's a non-starter, right? It's a boundary. Or if it's just, it's my opinion and I wanted to go here for vacation and not there. No, I'm really not willing to die on the mountain for this, right? It's not that big a deal, and I can be flexible and either give in to what they want or say, hey, you want to go here, I want to go there. Can we do a third alternative, maybe, right? That is not what either of us want, since we can't seem to agree here. Can we find something else that we both do agree upon, right? And so I think asking that question, and my wife and I now know, are you willing to die on the mountain for this? Like, is it so important that we go to this restaurant with these people on Thursday night when I'm super tired and I don't want to go out at all? Do I need to rally because this is super important to you and you really need to be there? Or can you give me a hall pass and say, no, I'd like to go, but man, if you're not in it, babe, I'm willing to compromise and let's just do something else. So that's a great question to ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just did a recording earlier on the topic of not, so it wasn't called Die on the Mountain, but we were talking about the red flags that come into relationships early on. And one of those flags that you see into a new relationship is that they don't want to, they want to restrict you from your friends and family. And so you gave a perfect example of, no, I'm just not feeling into it. I don't feel well. And that is a flag if it's done on several occasions in a row where you don't want to spend time with the spouse's relationship, but where you guys were communicating and you were asking about, is this you're willing to die on the mountain thing? That really gives you a perspective of how important it is to the spouse.
Right. And a question, Tina, that people just fail to ask all the time is, how important is this to you? Right? Help me understand, because I may think it's a 2, but you're singing like it's a 9 out of 10 importance. So if I'm not understanding that, I need you to, it's like, I can't read your mind, right? Are you you had a bad day and you're just hunkering down on this, but it's really not that important? Or, man, it's really critical and I better sit up and be aware. So how important is this to you? And then the second best question is to ask is, what does the ideal outcome look like for you here? What do you really want to see happen here? And then just zip it and listen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that is something I've had to make sure that I learned. As a coach, we learn how to ask questions and all of this. But one of the things in a personal relationship is that I had to learn to sit and listen to what was being said, but more so what the emotion behind what they were saying, because the words are just words. And sometimes they're way more angry than what is really going on. Sometimes they come out as angry words, and what really is happening is they're hurt.
Sure.
And if we listen to the words, then we get angry. So if we listen for the emotion And then we ask questions about the emotion. So, are you feeling this way because I hurt you? To me, that's a great question. And my husband and I had questions like that.
Hmm. Great questions. And, it comes back to communication, right? And are you seeking to understand, or are you waiting to respond, or seeking to be understood? Like, no, listen to me. Or are you reflecting back until your partner says, yeah, that's it. I get it. Exactly right. Or no, that's not really what I'm saying. Okay, I'm missing it. Help me understand, right? Help me understand why this is important, or help me understand what it is about this that makes it so important for you, right? So we all tend in communication, okay, when can I say what I want to say? As opposed to,
Right.
what's this person saying to me? Am I receiving it, and do I understand it? And do I have that empathy? Am I in the foxhole with them and feeling? Am I acknowledging and validating that they can feel that way, right? I think couples get in a lot of trouble when you're talking to someone working through divorce, right? And it's because they think the other person shouldn't feel the way they feel. Like,
Right.
Tina, why can't you just get over that? It's not that important, you know? Or you just gotta, right? You should, they should all over them, right?
Shit all
And
over him. Yep.
and tell them what they should do. And everybody has the right. I say, all the time, there's two opinions in every relationship, and they're both right, because you feel the way you feel, and you're entitled to that, and your partner feels the way they feel. So to the degree you understand that and learn to work with it is what's most important. You're not there to change them or give them a solution. Men often want to come in and change stuff. Let me fix it. Let me change it. Let me make it different for you. Then I'm doing my job as a man, when your job as a man is often just to listen. So that,
Right.
everybody, every single men and women all want to be, I call it HUVA, HUVA. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. They want to be valued, and they want to be appreciated. And if you can achieve those four emotions, those four sentiments in a relationship, man, you've got 9 out of 10, and you're doing some great things.
Yeah. And in my relationship, I was the one who I felt really bad. My late husband came from a very abusive, his point of view was a very abusive relationship where she belittled him and cut him down and just horrid things. And some of them I got to watch, and I got to read all of their emails from her from years prior to just going through all of that. So some of that, what he said was actual, I could see it. And because he went through all of that, I felt like I really needed to be present for him. He needed somebody to truly love him and give him a safe place, kind of like we would a child that just went through a bad day. And so I would always work at bringing myself, calming myself, bringing my voice down, because I can be quite animated, bringing it all down so I could be present for him. So the huva that you said, I wanted him to feel that, because I truly felt that from him
Sure.
all the time, even if we were in a disagreement. When we were fighting, no, I think when we fight, we're all about what's going on in our head and around us. We don't think about our partner, and that's why I choose to leave.
Sure. I think I love what you're saying, Tina, because it's really each of our own responsibility in our relationship to provide that safe place. The relationship should be an oasis from the work pressure, the community, the family, the career, whatever it is that's creating the pressure. The relationship has to be that, I can let down, I can relax. I'm not being judged, I'm not being demanded. I'm just being unconditionally loved, and I can hang out and rest in this great environment. And it takes work from both partners to do that. And you talked about conflict, and triggers we talked about earlier. Screaming is a huge trigger for me. If my wife raises her voice, even if she's getting excited and it's getting up there, I go, ho, ho, ho. I'm right here. Just bring it down a notch, because if you want me to close up and go away, the volume and, and even it might be, even though it could be excitement or you're passionate, I appreciate that, but that's a trigger for me. And I think most people, when there's conflict, they think, all right, game on, it's a fight. Put up my walls, brace for impact, right? And really the key to navigating conflict in a relationship is you got to reframe it and say, conflict is nothing more, Tina, than an invitation to connection. It's your partner shooting up a flare and going, help, something's wrong. I'm struggling,
Hmm.
I'm angry, I'm upset. I've got a need that's not being met or fulfilled, and I'm struggling. So when you look at it that way and say, wow, help me understand what's going on here, or what's your number one need right now? What is it that's coming up for you when I said this, when I did that, when we experienced this together? And then when they say it, you can say a couple simple things like we talked about earlier is, how, what would be the best way for this to work out for you? Help me understand, right? And so you've now taken this argument to, it's me versus you, to, wow, I can see you're really upset. Help me understand, what is it about this situation, discussion, something that happened, another person perhaps. What is it that's got you so upset? What's going on here? And keep asking the questions. And then it becomes, hey, I'm trying to understand. And then once you identify it, how would you like me to support you in this? And their answer might be, just listen. I don't need help.
Right. Right.
I'm just like, I'm so angry. I just need to vent because I feel like this is just wrong. And I'm so angry that it even happened, right? And it's back, as a coach, this is back to acknowledging and validating. Wow, I can see you're really upset. And it's so normal that anybody in that position that had this happen to them would be angry. And you have the right to feel that way. How can I help you in that moment right now? Right? So you just
Right.
took this
Right.
fireworks that's going to escalate and turn into a knockdown drag out, and you just brought it, you turn the hot burner down to low, right? So it's simmering, so now we can talk and figure out, how can I be the agent that you need right now to work through the emotion? And they'll tell you
Hmm.
normally. And if they say, I don't know what I need, that's okay. Then you can just say, well, you know what? I'm here. I'm not judging. Do, I'll let you do whatever you need to do to get whatever you need. And if you think of something I can do or you'd like me to do, but I'm next to you, no judgment, and I'm here, right? I'm here in the foxhole with you. I can't do anything about the bomb sailing overhead, but I'm not going anywhere. So, I'm next to you and I'm with you. And sometimes that's just all somebody needs to hear to be able to let go of or work through what they got going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I couple of things that a lot of what you're just saying right through that reminds me of a couple of relationships I have with family members. So this doesn't just fit with romantic people. We have to pay attention to how we communicate to others, how the huva, how all of our words, our I statements versus you statements, we need to slow, and I tell my clients this often, slow the conversation down. I've talked several times today about my elevated voice. I have a kid that's ADHD, and he's on steroids for that. And so he talks 90 miles an hour, very loud. And then I have another kid that I have to turn my phone all the way up and then leave the room and plug my ear to even hear him because he's so quiet. And that's the temperament of the two of them. And any relationship that we have, we need to be cognizant of the person we're communicating with. Give them respect. To me, that's the most important word in the Human Dictionary. Give them respect, and they'll give respect back, however that looks. And in this case, it's conversation.
Sure. Absolutely right. Yeah, you gotta honor them. You gotta respect them in the conversation and in what their thoughts are. It's not about judging or qualifying what they say or think in the moment. It's just about looking for that understanding and recognizing them for who they are, and that there's no judgment attached to it.
Yes, yes. And we're starting to come to the close. So all of your information will be at the bottom of the show notes, but tell us how we can get in touch with you.
Sure. I mean, if you want to learn more about me or my coaching or what I do or have some free resources, I'd say go to my website at matthewphoffman.com. And if you want to email me and set up a discussion, if you go on my website, I have links for free coaching sessions because a lot of people don't know what coaching is or is it right for them or how can it help them. So they can click, and I mean it. It says this is not a sales call. This is a gift of free coaching so you can experience what it's like in your relationship, in your business or career, whatever's most important to you and you're struggling with. I'd love to talk to you. And you can email me also, matthewphoffman.com. And I'm on most social media platforms, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook, TikTok, and I have a lot of content on YouTube under Kickass Couples Nation. So I'd love to help support you in the journey, and so you can take that relationship. If you're dissatisfied, if you're unhappy in that marriage, I'd like to help you do what you can do to get it to where you'd like to see it.
That's awesome. So I myself am a certified divorce coach, meaning that I'm trained in divorce and its complexities. I specialize in high conflict divorce, especially that from a toxic narcissistic partner. My late husband, my dad, and myself all experienced abuse in some form or another. And so not only do I have the mental knowledge, I also have the background. I've been through it. So that helps me to help my clients. I know firsthand what you go through. You can contact me by emailing me at coachtinalynn@gmail. That's coach, C-O-A-C-H, Tina, T-I-N-A, Lynn, L-Y-N-N @gmail.com. And my website is divorcecoachspecialist.com. You can also find me on social media, Facebook under Tina Lynn Huggins, that's Huggins, on LinkedIn under Tina Huggins, on Instagram under Divorce Coach Tina Lynn, on TikTok under Divorce Tina. And so Matthew, always at the end, I always ask for one little tidbit of something important that you would like the viewers to know.
Sure. I mean, my feeling is that it's never too late. Some people go, oh, there's no saving it, there's no salvaging. And really, if the commitment is there, your commitment, and your partner's commitment is willing or to consider get there, you can do it. And it takes a while. To turn an aircraft carrier, you make the motion and it takes a long time to come around, but it's worth it. And if you're willing to do the work, there's really nothing you can't achieve.
I love the aircraft carrier part because that's so true. It takes a long time to get those suckers turned around, heading the other direction. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if you've been in a relationship for 15 years, it took 15 years to get to where you are. So it's going to take not that long, but it's going to take a little bit of time to understand and head another direction.
Yeah. And I'm so hoping all of our viewers get to see Matthew back real soon. So I always finish off by letting people know, if you are in an abusive situation right here, right now, call 911 or in the UK 999. Get the police there, press charges. The charges are the key out of the home. Do not drop the charges. That's something my late husband would push, into dropping his charges, and things got worse. They always get worse. So the next part is, if you or somebody else is involved in domestic violence, please call the domestic violence hotline at 800-799-7233. That number again is 800-799-7233. And please like, comment, and share this so we can get the message out to other people. Thank you so much, Matthew, for coming on. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it as well, Tina. Look forward to the next time.
Yes. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.